Good evening. Welcome to this month's Town Administrators Report. I'm David Watts Jr., and with me is our Town Administrator, Steve Mayo. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, David. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Excellent.
We're
Much better this week.
We're now transitioning from a really bizarre spring into what could be a really hot summer.
Yeah, that's what it seems to be, so that's okay.
That's the forecast. But at least the weather is getting a little more consistent.
Yes.
Give or take. But amazingly enough, it wasn't planned this way originally. But amazingly enough, this is our recap of probably the shortest annual town meeting anyone can remember.
Yeah, I think it went quite smoothly and actually quicker than I thought it was going to go. But
2 hours and 32 minutes.
Yep. Yeah, not bad. 18 articles, so pretty good. Yeah.
So we had 101 voters attending, according to the town clerk. And, I think probably one of the main things to come out of it was the little amount of participation that the voters felt they needed to have article to article this year, with the exception of 17 and 18, which we'll get to. But for the most part, it seemed as though the voters came in pretty much already knowing what was coming down the pike.
Yeah, I do like the way you phrased that, that the voters didn't feel like they had to have a lot of participation. Because I do struggle with that. And, when I go through and people make fun of me because I have a town meeting book for the spring town meeting and for the fall town meeting and for a special town meeting. I have a special book, and I have 30 books in my office or so. And I know I write down exactly what questions, what comments were, and I go back through them. And, sometimes I think, was it that boring? Was I that boring in the presentation? Was it that confusing? But I think that you hit the nail on the head. I think that, we kind of let's talk about the budget. We really start the budget process in October. We have the tri-board meeting, we meet, we talk about where, in a big, broad sense, where we think, funding is going to be, where we think expenses are going to be, where we think revenue is going to be for the next year. And then we actually drill down to, on the municipal side, the town side, each budget line item by line item, starting in January. And the school department is doing the same thing on their portion of the budget. So I think that there's a lot of information out there. WCAT is great. Our forums together. We talk about the budget 3 or 4 times. And we talk about maybe some interesting parts of the budget. For instance, this year, health.
Right.
Mental health, a big issue. We had the health agent on, and we talked about mental health. So I kind of think that, because of these forums, the forum that we do with Finance Committee before the meeting, because of the regular meetings, because that, everything is taped, you can go on and look at it. I think that a lot of the questions and concerns are answered ahead of time. So I'm hoping that makes it go smoother. I think we could tell if there's a controversy, people will show up, they're not shy. So that's what I think is happening.
This is true, and the nature of the comments and the questions were usually very short, very pointed.
Right.
There wasn't the grandstanding that we've seen in past years.
Correct.
On some issues. But I think you're right also that for the most part, the voters who were there were the voters who tend to keep themselves up to date on town issues anyway. I
think you're right. I mean, it's a lot of faces that I know that I've seen, a lot of people that I've seen, tuning into some of the meetings because, they're via Zoom and everything. You can sometimes see who's tuning in. So, yeah, and I think, and we had, questions from a lot of the same people that ask those questions at town meeting, that participate more than maybe others do. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. On the other side, 101 voters is a sad number.
Yes.
When you consider that we have 16,000 registered voters in the town, or somewhere around that number.
And we couldn't accommodate all 16,000.
No, we couldn't. But the the small minority of voters that participate in an open town meeting is a sad commentary in some ways.
Yeah, it is, and I get that it's very time consuming. And, I know people have a lot of things going on in their lives. There's, youth activities, there's, church activities, there's their own personal activities. I also think that there was nothing really controversial on this list, on this town meeting floor.
Right.
So that didn't drive the numbers out. And, we went back to the Monday night, so it's interesting whether or not Saturday morning is a better time for people.
Right.
And I
think we had a better participation or number of voters on the Saturday meetings we had than we had this time around.
But even that wasn't a huge number either. But I do think that we had more people on Saturday mornings, like maybe, by 30-40%.
Yeah.
So I do think that that's what happened. And I know that the town council is looking at that and maybe thinking about coming back in the fall on a Saturday meeting. And so we'll have to see what happens. But I do think that, spring is tough. There's, Little League, and there's, youth soccer, and there's school events, and there's,
Right.
Class plays and class concerts. So Saturday morning might be easier.
Well, yeah, people aren't rushing home from
Exactly.
work and doing dinner and then
Yeah.
running out of the house to get to
Exactly.
town meeting. So, and the other thing is the Saturdays tend to be as much a social event as a
Yeah.
event for dealing with budgets and
Right.
and other articles that come down the pike. The only two articles that really elicited discussion were the last two.
Yeah, the two zoning articles,
The
which
two
is
zoning
normally
articles.
which is normally the case. Yeah.
But often with zoning articles, we see, the people who are affected by it the most crowding in, and then as soon as it's over,
Right.
and we didn't even see that this time. But one was the old 1920s gas station on Albion Street.
Right.
That's now an endangered species.
Yeah, I would say that is not only endangered, but it's done. It sounds like. But what was interesting about that one, and the citizen petition's number one.
Yeah.
So the town council doesn't need to necessarily take a position on it, and they usually don't. But I think what was interesting about the first one, about the old gas station, is that was what the neighborhood wanted. Mm-hmm. I would say virtually every abutter and every person in that neighborhood came out and spoke in favor of it, that felt that it fit better in the neighborhood. It was what they wanted. There were some people that spoke against it, but those weren't people in the neighborhood.
Right.
And I think that the town has a pretty good history of when there's a zoning change that is, by the, private zoning change or private petition, people usually listen to the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And I can remember people getting up at town meeting and saying, I'd like to hear what the neighbors have to say about this, because they're the ones that are going to live with it every day.
Right.
And I think that question didn't need to be asked at this one, because the neighborhood got up right away. And were first in line or second in line to talk about it. So that, to me, that was on the first one, because that was a specific area. We've had those before. Very specific areas that are being repurposed for some use or another. And if the neighborhood's for it, it usually kind of goes through.
Which also surprised me in that there are so many comments around town about, the fact that we need to stop building.
Yeah.
That there's too much building going on.
Yeah.
And yet this was one where, you're right, the neighborhood said, this would benefit our neighborhood.
Right. I think they felt that, and when they say stop building, they say stop housing. So this was going to be, what, a two-family?
Two-family house.
A two-family house,
Yep.
and which would be less traffic, less everything than a gas station is.
Right.
Or repair shop, or whatever
Right.
it was for
Currently a repair shop.
Currently a
yes.
repair shop.
Yeah.
So that, to me, was pretty telling, and that wasn't even close, as I recall. I don't even have to recall, I can look at it. Because that was Article 17. It needed 2/3 for zoning.
Right, we had to count it regardless.
Have to count it unless it was unanimous. Yeah, that
Right.
was 89-9.
Right,
So that was a 90% of the, of the voters there voted to make the change, So that's an overwhelming consensus. And I think, you know what, you said you had 101 people that checked in.
Yep.
So 98 of them stayed and voted on this one. It's pretty good. And I'm thinking that probably 20 of them were in that neighborhood. So I'm thinking that 20% of the people that came to town meeting came for this issue. Some of them may have come anyway.
Right.
But I think there were people that came specifically for that issue in the
Right.
neighborhood, so, interesting.
And then the other one was Article 18, which had to do with changing a zoning bylaw having to do with wetlands.
Yeah, and I think that one, to me, it's the classic case when when something is presented at town meeting, whether it's zoning or financial or otherwise, and it's not easily understood.
Right.
Or the electorate that doesn't really, understand what's happening there.
Sometimes it's the subtleties that
People vote no.
yeah,
They're going to vote no. And I think, in my mind, that's what happened there. And I think the point that the petitioner was making on that one was that this is a bylaw that goes to the building inspector that says that if you are building within, I think it's 50 feet of a stream, you need to not only go through the Conservation Commission, which is probably much more technically versed
Right.
to handle that, but you also need to get a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals.
right,
So sometimes they may have differing interests. So why do you have these two different avenues for people to go? You need both. So I think that was the point that maybe wasn't understood well, maybe wasn't made well. But I think there was, I could look at a town meeting and see not real understanding about this and thinking, well, this is all over town. I just want to keep it the way it is because I don't understand it. So, and that's what happens in zoning.
right,
In particular, or really any petition at town meeting. If you don't understand, if we're going to buy a new fire truck and you don't know why we're buying a new fire truck, people are going to vote no.
right.
So I just think that's.
And quite frankly, it's easier to explain the need for a new fire truck than
Right.
to explain a zoning change.
Exactly.
But in some ways also, Article 18 was almost moot because of an earlier article where the
Right.
bylaws are all going to be
Reviewed anyway. Right, and in fact, a member of the public made that point.
Yeah,
And said, you know what? Because that was a comprehensive area in a change of the bylaw, that was gonna go all over town. Article 17 was just a specific location.
Right.
Has more to do with location than looking at the zoning bylaws in general. That argument really didn't apply to 17, but to 18, hey, we're looking at the whole zoning bylaw anyway. Why don't, maybe this is better to look at, maybe it doesn't need to be repealed. Maybe it needs to be tweaked.
right,
So that was, that probably also added to, people that were on the fence. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Let them look at it and come back with something in the future.
yeah.
So that did make
exactly,
sense, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's already going to happen, let's leave it the way it is.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I found interesting was there was very little, almost no debate on the budget itself.
Yeah.
And usually we hear a lot more debate on some of the, especially capital expenses
Right.
or school expenses, and we just didn't hear that this year.
Well, I think that, we've gone through the budget a couple of times in this show.
Yes.
Town council has gone through it, finance committee goes through it, and they go through it budget by budget, which I don't really think to that level happens in a lot of other communities. So when the budget gets presented, and you're talking about, let's pick on let's pick on the assessor's office, okay?
Right.
Pick on my friend Victor, okay? General government function, okay?
Yep.
So in your budget book, okay?
Yep.
That is available online, was available at town meeting, it shows everything that's being, spent in the assessor's office.
Yep.
You could ask questions. I mean, I try to give a little bit of an explanation ahead of time on areas that I know that have kind of changed by more than other areas. So contractual services in that line item went from 22,000 to 29,000.
Yes.
Not a huge jump when you look at the entire scheme of things, but as a percentage-wise, is a little bit high.
Yep.
And why did that happen? Because we need to actually go out and assess utilities and their property every year instead of every 3 years. So that's why that contractual service, it's very technical, as an expert that does that. That's why that increased. That was mentioned in the presentation. So maybe that question, we try to anticipate those questions.
Sure.
But the other thing is that presentation of that budget was online, like we talked about at the beginning. You could go to that meeting if you wished. You can go to every town council meeting, in the last couple of years. Watch the tape again and move it. You don't have to stay there for the whole thing.
Right.
You can move it yourself. You can fast forward it, go back. So I think a lot of that, and we do a lot of shows. We have finance committee looks at it, and this doesn't really happen in a lot of other towns.
Right.
At least in the presentation that we do, because I was talking with town councilor EL, Tom Mullen before town meeting, because we have a little kind of meeting to see how everything's going to go, what is
Yep.
2/3, what is, to make sure that we're all ready to roll on it. And what he was telling me is that a lot of communities, and because he does a lot of this, municipal work, they will say, the budget for fiscal year, 2023 is $114,817,500 as stated in the recommendation book. Are there any questions? That's it. There is no kind of prepared presentation.
No, and actually, we had the review before
Right.
we even got to that of where
Exactly.
we were financially.
We were financially anyway.
Yeah.
So, and I said, really? He said to me, yes. He says, that's how it's done. And I'm thinking, you know what? I go way back like you from town meeting for a long time, right? Probably 40 years. I've been at town meeting 40, 42, 43 maybe, but maybe a few more.
50.
Maybe 50. And I don't think that would fly here, nor should it.
No.
No, I mean, there should be some work done to this. There should be an explanation. We should try to anticipate what people are going to ask about and be ready to answer their questions if we didn't cover it. And that's what it is. We didn't cover it.
Right.
If it elicits a lot of questions. So, yeah, I go through and we break it up section by section, which a lot of other communities don't. And I get kind of jealous of the mayors around us who, they do the budget on June 29th. All the state numbers are in. I'm still waiting to see if I guessed right. So it's a little bit of an easier dynamic for them.
But it's also a different animal if it's representative town meeting or if it's a city council.
Absolutely.
Versus what we do.
Right.
Which I think is the strength of our system too, is the direct participation by anyone who wants to.
Correct.
Who's a registered voter.
Right.
Two of the other articles that potentially could have been long-winded discussions and didn't. One was on Article 10 on the replacement of the 1927 Harts Hill water tower.
Yeah. Well, again, this had been discussed with the town council, had been discussed with the DPW advisory board first, discussed with the town council second, then discussed with the finance committee. So it had 3 hearings just on this. There was a very little PowerPoint presentation presented. But I think that this is a case where this particular area, this particular tower has been kind of discussed, in the past, like people are aware that it's old, that it's going to need to be done someday, and
That
the
it's
time.
vital to the water system in the town.
It's critical. It's critical, and I think that Director Conway did a great job in explaining why we need it, because not everyone. I didn't understand that. No, why we need it for the pressure and balancing the pressure when things happen.
Well, and pointing out how absolutely important it was during, for instance, the Baptist church fire.
Exactly.
To maintain water throughout the rest of the town while that was being
right,
fought.
which we did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, to me, it was done very well. We had all the background information here, and you're right. I was a little bit shocked that there wasn't any questions, and I wrote down unanimous with a circle, no questions. So I'll have my binder to look at.
But that's also one of those things that you're right. In the past has been an article of lengthy discussion.
Right.
By a lot of different interested parties in town to determine, is this something really to vote for or not?
And I do think that in prior years, let's say that something really good has come out of the pandemic. In prior years, you would have had to have gone to the DPW advisory board meeting to hear about this. You would have had to have gone to the finance committee meeting in person and seen the discussion of that. You would have to have gone to the town council meeting, then Board of Selectmen years ago, and or watch it on WCAT, because WCAT cannot cover every meeting because there just isn't a staff of 1,000 here to do this.
Or a budget.
Or a budget. and nor should they. But via Zoom and via that format,
Right.
all those discussions about this are a click away from
Right.
people. And geez, if you don't want to watch the finance committee talk about, another issue, you can fast forward right through there. Like kids at home are going to lose me, like they're on their VCR, right? And fast forward.
Oh,
and,
it's Dad again.
yeah, and look at that. So I think that again, I'm thinking there was enough of that out there that people understood.
Yeah.
And had a chance to review it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I that's what I tend to think.
I would like to think that the majority of people who came to town meeting that night were vastly better prepared than we've seen in past years.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that's the case, because that's what we try to do.
And I hope that if that's the trend, I hope that trend continues.
Yep.
The other one that I thought would engender a much longer debate, especially after the experience of the last 2 years at Broadway, was Article 10 and the design and construction of railroad crossing improvements so that the town can maintain its quiet status.
You know what? I think that had been so discussed over many, many meetings that I think people understood that, hey, and it's adding to $1.25 million that should come from and I say should, from the federal government, because
Right.
I don't know. I never count on that till we have it. But that is something that's going to make sure that we don't have to have this discussion again 10 years down the road or 3 years down the road,
Right.
and that we're able to do this. So,
And it could be sooner rather than later
and it could be sooner rather than
without
later.
doing it. And, really, there are only 2 crossings that can't adequately be done, and one has a guard,
Correct.
and that's Forest Street in Greenwood, and
Yeah.
the other is Greenwood Street itself. Because of the way it's
Right.
laid out, there's just no way to really effectively do that to meet
Correct.
the standard,
Correct, yeah. I thought you were going to say Article 12 should have had more. Oh, you would expect more discussion.
Because of the tax implications
Right,
on there.
right.
Yeah.
And it was new.
Yeah.
It's a new concept.
Yeah.
But I think that, again, this had been discussed a couple of meetings at the town council.
Right. We've discussed it once
Yeah,
here.
we've discussed it
Yeah.
here and the
Yep.
finance committee, and I think that it's a concept that people really like. And I think the fact that we have a green business coming to Wakefield,
Yep.
in improving a building,
Yep.
that I think, I saw a lot of nods. I said, this is the building. If you're going up the back way to Market Street, you see that white building that's set back. Saw a lot of nods. Oh, that's 7 Audubon Road.
Right.
So I think that people understood That's what's happening. Great location for a business. That's what we want, right? And I think that it was a very modest proposal. Really, $7,000 a year for 5 years.
Right.
It's going to create, 60 new jobs. If this doesn't occur, you don't get, they're not going to get those breaks. And by the way, it's tax money we would never have gotten but for
The fact that they're moving here.
the fact that they're moving
Yes.
here. So
Yeah.
I think that those probably, I saw a lot of nodding from people as I was making the comments at town meeting, but I was somewhat surprised that there wasn't more discussion on that. But again, I think it had been gone through a number of the vetting process, what we try to do, and including this forum is great, right? So,
But also, there have been other discussions on the whole concept of the tax increment
Yes.
financing, the TIF agreement.
yeah,
In the past, in the hopes that it would
Right.
attract business here.
right.
And I think we've had that discussion at least one town meeting.
Yes.
Prior to this
Yeah.
one.
And let's hope that we have more. Like I said, I think I said at town meeting, I hope to bring more to the table, because that means we're vibrant and we're bringing businesses in. That's very good for not only our overall economy at a town sense, but good for kids getting jobs and things like that, so.
Right, right.
know.
And plus, there are companies that, have been up at Audubon Road for a long time, that their industries may be going away for
Right.
whatever reason. New businesses hopefully will come in and
Come
take
in,
their
and they're gonna
place.
have to make some changes and to the structure and add to the tax base that way, and if they're doing that and adding jobs, and we can work with the state on it, which is the other thing, is that it's not the town of Wakefield on
Right.
our own saying it. This has gotta go through the state, and the state is a signatory on this, and the state actually needs to, the applicant needs to actually go to the state and get approval from them.
Right.
From the Massachusetts Economic Development Council.
Right.
So this is, where, we were the third peg in the tripod that had to be approved was town meeting. So I think that also gives a little bit of, there's more vetting, another set of eyes has looked at it. This
Right.
just isn't
At
just
any
us.
point before it came before the town, it could have been killed.
It could have been, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And it still has to happen. They still got to do the work.
Is there a timetable on that?
The agreement here is for 5 years, but it could move out. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's when it gets built, right? So you're not gonna tax something that hasn't been built yet.
right, right.
Yeah.
So, but all in all, I think it was a successful town meeting. I'm amazed it was so short. I went in there thinking we were gonna have at least 2, if not 3 sessions,
I know. I think I bet one session with you.
And you won again.
Oh,
You won again. So, but the nice thing is we're past it. We're now, we can look to other things coming up. Obviously, this is May. Summer is coming.
summer is coming. Yes.
And, all of the things attendant with that. Real quickly, July 4th is going to be back to normal this year?
The plans are is that we're going back to a normal July 4th festivities with the family activities in the morning, and from the fishing derby to the doll carriage parade, to the floats, to the races.
Yeah.
Parade at 4 o'clock, and still planning to have back to that tradition with the class of '66 on the common playing.
Well, they
and-
haven't been around for a long
Yeah,
time.
well,
but
I think that they're coming
whoever is
back.
performing.
I think they're coming back actually, and the fireworks.
Yep.
So it is a go, and hopefully we have a nice day, much like today, like sunny and cool, and nice little breeze, not too humid, and it'll be nice to bring that back. We're looking forward to it, and we're already planning, working with those at the West Side Social Club and the Parade Committee, putting it all together, working with our emergency management director, police and fire, to make sure that everyone has a safe, happy day because we really don't relax until the last car leaves after the fireworks around midnight that night.
Sure, sure. And we'll pick up on that and summer activities on our next show in June. And in the meantime, Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.